Now, this film was developed by a group of gentlemen from California just as the Depression hit the Goose Bay area. They had bought pictures, they had bought much land, and they developed this picture as a sales tool. Goose Bay is a natural harbor and world port and is respectively dedicated to the chambers of commerce and business executives of the region. The new all-year Roosevelt State Highway along the shores of the Pacific and through virgin forests brings us to Goose Bay. This is running north from across, the bridge wasn't there then, but from the ferry north toward Lakeside, and it shows you the terrain, the trees, and how crooked that road was. This is a lot of old-growth timber that you hear much about today. The timber, as you see, isn't there anymore. It's been logged, and homes have been built along this highway. And the highway itself has been replaced by the highway along the bay from Bridgeport to North Bend. We're now moving down to the south of Coos County. This is the Bandon Beach, a very beautiful scene. This Bandon Beach is a place where many people come to spend their vacations just to be on the beach at Bandon. Arriving at Goose Bay, we find 4 incorporated cities and 7 populated communities. The 4 cities are Marshfield, North Bend, Eastside, and Empire. And the communities begin with the city of Goose Bay, Charleston, Bunker Hill, Crawford Point, Bay City, Millington, and Glasgow. Altogether, there are approximately 15,000 people live in the area. We're now starting at the south of Goose Bay, the city of Marshfield at that time, and moving north along Broadway. You'll see the Egyptian theater sign. Sign's no longer there. The Egyptian still is as we move north. And across Anderson Street, we come to the J.C. Penney store. This is where it was located in those days, and beyond it was probably the finest store in the Goose Bay country, the Hub. Across from the Hub was the American Bank building, and in the distance is the Tioga Hotel, which was uncompleted at that time. Now we're on the waterfront looking east from Goose Bay. You'll see a dredge here in the distance. It's interesting as you go through this film, you'll notice the dredge in many places, which is the way it is today. With all the deepening of the channel, there's almost a dredge constantly working in the Goose Bay Harbor. The long line in the distance there is the approach to the ferry from Eastside. Then, and here's the dredge right in front. In these years, when you wanted to go from Marshfield to Eastside, you went by ferry. The bridge across Isthmus Slough had not been completed in those days. Right beyond it there, what looks like water today, is what we used to call the Eastside Airport, and it's now an industrial site. Now we're looking up to the waterfront where many of the ships, as they are today, loaded and unloaded. The size of the ships has changed a great deal, and the cargoes have somewhat. This is the Broadway, South Broadway, coming into view. And we believe this picture was taken from the Tioga Hotel. It's the only way you could get this perspective. Looking across the roofs, the higher roof in the central part of the picture there is the top of the Chandler Hotel, which then was a very well-known hostelry. And here with a little round roof is the Goose Bay National Bank. We've quickly moved to North Bend, and this is the Goose Bay Hotel then. Later changed to the North Bend Hotel. This is one of the buses that serve the area. Gorson King Bus Company ran every 15 minutes from North Bend to Goose Bay, and it just went around the corner there. Beautiful homes and apartments on Pay Street greet the visitor to Goose Bay. We're now down on 5th Street and moving north along 5th Street. These were some of the finest homes in the Coos Bay area at that time. And most of them still exist today. Now we're going to go back and start over again on the other side of the street, and this is 5th Street again, and we're moving north. This home with the pillars on it is one of the fine homes in Coos Bay. The last, to my memory, was occupied by Phil Waters, who had a radio station in Coos Bay. We jumped across the street, still going north, same street. The home just coming into view was occupied for a great many years by Oscar Gullifson, who was the recorder of the city of Coos Bay. That's the central school in Coos Bay. And coming into view is the armory. The armory is no longer there. It's been taken down. And then good many homes on these streets going up the hill on 4th Street. This is one of Marshfield's premier apartment houses. The Myrtle Arms apartment is still in use. Excellent public buildings provide facilities for educational, civic, social, and fraternal gatherings. This is the Marshfield High School, was known as the East Branch, and still in use. This is the Harding School, which at that time was the junior high school for the Marshfield school system, and is now serving as the Madison schools out of when the Empire School burned down. They brought the children up here. This is the Marshfield City Hall, downtown Coos Bay today. It's a restaurant, and other facilities are in the building. One of the interesting things as we progress along, and notice the trousers on this gentleman. You see a lot of those for the people who work outside. We're back again to the Marshfield Armory, U.S. Army it was, and this is the public library, just a block or two from the Armory. And this is the Macaulay Hospital. I believe at the time we're looking at it is called the Wesley Hospital. Now, this is the Episcopal Church in Goose Bay, which has been replaced by a much larger church in downtown Goose Bay. This is a building in Goose Bay that we have been unable to identify. So any of you folks in the audience happen to recognize it, why, speak up, let us know. Tributary to Goose Bay, there's 176 billion feet of virgin timber, approximately 1/12 of the nation's supply. I think we're going north again from Goose Bay through the trees, show the old growth and the type of forest we had then. Much of this timber has since been cut, and almost universally where it was cut has been replanted with young trees which are growing today. This is the type of unloading we saw in those years. Most of the timber logs that were to become timber came into Goose Bay by railroad. The big trucks had not yet been developed to the extent where they can handle these that well. The Goose Bay Lumber Company, the premier lumber company in that area, brought their logs in from Eden Ridge, which is beyond Powers. And here's a truck unloading logs. Goose Bay Lumber Company brought their logs in from Blue Ridge, which is behind Sumner and can be seen from town. Here are the jet streams they used to get the gravel and the mud off the logs so they wouldn't dull the saws. Keeping the saws sharp is an ever-present problem. The plant of the Goose Bay Lumber Company is the world's largest single-unit mill with a capacity of 750,000 board feet daily. This plant employs hundreds of workmen. We're coming to this plant just across from the Isthmus Slough from this plant is east side. That's where the trees are. Now you're getting a pretty good view of the plant as it was then. And it still exists today. Just in the middle of the screen is a wigwam burner, which is no longer used in this country because of air pollution. And we're swinging around so that we'll be looking at Bunker Hill in just a few minutes. This is the site today of the Weyerhaeuser metric mill. The area you're looking at now is a site of the chrome loading plant that was just constructed on Goose Bay. Now we're coming around again to the view of the east side where the boat building facilities are located. They're not in this picture. And there are the sheds with the lumber that is sorted out by lengths and grade. This is a change of shift, and you see the men coming from the mill on their way home. Quite a difference in clothing today. They all have, a great many of them have hats on, where today they would all have caps. And here they're leaving the plant and going toward Bunker Hill. Many of these people who are walking up this went to boarding houses in the Bunker Hill area. They were a big operation at the time this mill was operating. Many industrial plants manufacture paper pulp, battery separators, furniture and byproducts. The premier one of those was the Evans Auto Loading Company. Evans Auto Loading Company was located on the site that's now the Fred Meyer store. Now they're having a little fun here in between, must be between shifts. This is also in the same area. This is a long dock that runs out into the water and has been identified as the dock in which shipping from the Goose Bay Pulp Company in the lower bay was made. Although it's called Goose Bay Pulp, it also was a major manufacturing lumber mill. We're back up again in the same area as the Evans plant and the Goose Bay Lumber Company, the Western Cedar Company. Stowing of lumber in ships was quite a bit different then than it is now. These bundles you see being loaded on were then stowed by individual pieces and loaded, fit tightly into the ship. Now they're bundled and strapped into bundles and loaded by bundles rather than individual boards. Another one of the wigwam burners that no longer used. Most of the material that went into wigwam burners, except for bark, is now chopped up into chips and shipped to Japan. Another one of the mills that dot the area. The dairy and cheese industry of Coos County amounted to more than $2 million in 1929 and is growing rapidly. You really need to translate that in today's dollars, and that would be about 10 times as much because of the devaluation of our dollar. Here's one of the dairy herds. At that time, dairying was one of the big industries in Goose Bay country. It's not so much today. Most of the dairies have gone out of business, and those that are left are big mechanized plants. Dairying was the staples in the Fidel Valley and Coos River. Coos River, where most of the milk was brought down by boat. This is the Swift and Company plant in Myrtle Point. It has since burned and been rebuilt partially. This is the Mellow West Creamery, Goose Bay Mutual Creamery, technical name of it. They manufactured and shipped tons and tons of cheese into the San Francisco area. And the supply for this came pretty much out of Coos River some out of North Slough and Haines Slough in the North Bend area. Oh, it no longer exists. This is the back side of it looking. And north of that was the Ocean Dock Company run by Lloyd Rippey. Today this is in the site of the Central Dock, and that wigwam burner behind that was the Conrad Lumber Company burner. And this is one of the advertising signs from the Mellow West cheese. Crop failures never known in Coos County. Cows just kept producing milk. After 5 years' work, the U.S. federal government have completed the jetties which now protect the entrance to the Great Harbor of Goose Bay. Approximately $7 million has been expended to date in this harbor development. 355,000 tons of rock from the Coos County quarries is being used in this work. You're now looking at the South Jetty and down toward the lighthouse, and this is, maybe many of you have been on this point or close behind it, because that is where the Coast Guard lookout station is. And since this picture's been taken, that jetty has been rebuilt twice because the waves keep wearing it out and washing it down. The same is true of the North Jetty. One of the big problems of these jetties is, of course, the density of the rock, and if it's too soft, it wears out rather rapidly. Now this jetty runs on into Goose Bay to control the end of the North Spit. In behind that jetty is a favorite place for the local fishermen to crab. And now we're looking across to the Bar View site, and where the trees are now is all developed into very nice homes. And this shows the structure around that point there where the railroad brought the rock after it was brought down from Coos River. We're up to the Coos River Quarry now. That rock was, for the last jetty replacement, was deemed too soft, so they brought rock down the Columbia River and down the Pacific Ocean and brought it in the bar for the last replacement on the North Jetty. These are some of the barges. The U.S. engineers operated 2 tugs that brought a load of barges with rock on them down the bay each day. Along the deep waterfront of Goose Bay, shipping and industries present a convincing picture. This is looking, as you can see, the Tioga Hotel on the right-hand side, but this is looking up the street, and this is the waterfront, most of which is gone now. We're looking at probably today the site of the Sauce Brothers Towing Company. Here's our friend the dredge in front again, still pumping mud out into the east side flats. There was a great deal more small boat traffic in Goose Bay in those days than there is today. A lot of that was caused by the milk being brought down and to the creamery. This building is no longer in existence either. And this is about where the Port of Goose Bay has its office. We're now looking south on Goose Bay. Have our friend the dredge again. Look at the little boats there. There's the Tioga Hotel. It's quite interesting. We hear a lot today about the logs being shipped to Japan, but this has been going on for at least 60 years. There's a load of logs being loaded aboard the ship. This is at the dock in Goose Bay. And here's a different ship, astern of the one we just saw, and you will see the log raft out in the bay there that the men, the longshoremen, are hooking up the bridles that take the logs aboard. More ships, more logs. In the meantime, ships have got bigger. We're back looking into the waterfront of North Bend. In the distance is the Central School. This was at that time what was known as the Pedersen Lumber Company, and Pedersen Laundry. This is the city dock. Building's no longer there, and behind it in the distance is the North Bend Hotel. And now we've kind of, from that picture, we've moved south to where the Mountain States Power Company has their plant. And these are the barges that hog fuel to the... There's a picture of the ferry going from Marshfield to East Side. The only way you got there. The dredge, again, is quite busy. It isn't just keeping the harbor clean, but they lowered the depth of the harbor by many feet during these years so that bigger ships could be accommodated. This is the Standard Oil dock that is halfway between North Bend and Goose Bay, and just recently most of this has been taken down because of the problem they have with storage of oil in containers. That's the Standard Oil, was the Standard Oil warehouse right there. This is looking at it from a different side, and their project at that time was called Red Crown Gasoline. This was then 99 highway, it's now 101. The Southern Pacific Railroad Bridge over Goose Bay is an achievement of great value. Every port has to have access to the hinterlands, and when the railroad brought in, it made a tremendous difference in the whole economic picture of Goose Bay. Goose Bay has around her shores 400 square miles and billions of tons of high-grade lignite coal, several mines now being in operation. At the time we're speaking of, coal was one of the major exports from Goose Bay. It was going to the San Francisco market, and it gradually went into decline with the development of oil fuel, because it was easier to automatically fuel oil than to shovel coal. This is one of the big mines in Goose Bay. Much coal was loaded out of the Bunker Hill bunkers, and that's where Bunker Hill's got its name, from the coal bunkers that were built there to service ships. This gentleman's having a little trouble with the dock. There were a number of big mines, the Southport mines and Libby mines. I don't believe there's a single coal mine operating in Coos County today. These are some of the carloads of coal getting ready to be shipped. Notice the jodhpurs that the gentleman has. You see a lot of it in this time. Many geologists have advanced the opinion that oil exists under the Goose Bay region. A deep test well is now being drilled by the Fat Elk Oil and Gas Company in this region. Fat Elk is just out of Coquille. The valley flat right there is known as the Fat Elk Valley, right? And on the opposite side from Coquille, as you go into the timber country, was where they put this oil well. You know, they never said what happened. They never said they found oil. Obviously they didn't, or maybe obviously they might have. Beside all that, many knowledgeable people still think there's oil under the ground here in Coos County. It is known there are millions and millions of tons of coal. The fishing industry had last year brought nearly $2 million into Goose Bay. 3 modern packing plants purchased and shipped the catch of some 500 fishing boats, who now make Goose Bay their home port. These are the salmon trollers here. And it's interesting today with all the trouble the salmon trollers are having. Cheap electric power is available to industries and homes from the Mountain States Power Company plant. A 10,000 kilowatt addition to the Goose Bay plant is now being constructed. We're looking north toward North Bend. This is the plant coming into view here, and the addition is just this side of it. Since that time, with the installation of the dams at Bonneville and others on the Columbia River, it's much cheaper to use the electrical supply. So this has been abandoned, and much of this site is occupied by the Weyerhaeuser mill. Now we're looking toward Goose Bay, and that's the Shell storage plants there that you can see. They're no longer there. They're just about across from the Chinese restaurant there. So these are construction forms on the new Mountain States Power Plant. And this was all fueled by what they called hog fuel, which is chopped up cinders and shavings. You can play out of doors a year-round in the Goose Bay country. Lakes, rivers, and beaches furnish fishermen, sportsmen, and autoists every variety of recreation. This is just to show that all life is just not working. You do have time to fish and enjoy yourself. This is up on South Goose River. And one of the interesting changes from today would be, I don't you see anyone out rowing a boat anymore. They would have a 5 to a 10 to a 24 outboard to push them along. But when you did row, it was peaceful and quiet, very interesting. And the gentleman has a fish. Well, it's pulling real good. Must be there he comes. Good-sized fish. I don't know how they arranged that just while we're watching him, but we're glad they did. This just shows some of the other sea products. That's Goose Bay crabs there on the right and the big Empire clams on the left. And one of the recreational sports they had in those days was racing on the bay in hydroplanes. Now, many of these hydroplanes were built by the people who owned them. And it was an interesting sight and attracted good crowds. This is a small tugboat. Now we're down in the Charleston area, and the Coast Guard at the lookout point was served by not by a road as it is today, but by a walkway. And crossing one of the deep chasms is this swinging bridge. It was fun to walk across it. We're back up Goose River again. Isn't that a nice picture of the fog early in the morning and the sun coming up on the water and the trees? No wonder they'd rather go fishing than work. Now we're down in the south end of Coos County, and this is Arch Rock. This is between Gold Beach and Brookings. And it's a well-known landmark in that area. We jumped up real quick. This is Sunset Beach. And that's you'll recognize the rocks there in Wizard Island out here. Then, as now, one of the most popular spots to picnic was. Now, the scenes you've just shown are actual views taken in March 1930. Goose Bay offers remarkable inducements to investors and settlers on account of cheap living costs, unrivaled climate, and vast undeveloped resources. All visitors are welcome to this great natural harbor of the Pacific. Flowers bloom the year-round in the Goose Bay region. This is an extract from the report of Major General Edgar Jadwin, Chief of Engineers, who made it to the Secretary of War December 10, 1927, saying, "The area tributary to Goose Bay and the large expenditures which have been made by the federal government for harbor improvements have made Goose Bay the most important harbor between the mouth of the Columbia River and the entrance to San Francisco Bay."
My grandfather, Jess W. Forrester, came to Goose Bay from the Alaska area. This film was my grandfather's, and he kept it, of course, with him in his home. Probably the last time that I viewed the film prior to right now was when my grandfather was living up in Portland, and it was fairly shortly before he died.
When they logged off the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, those big, rich lumbermen like C.A. Smith started looking at the Northwest. Just before the turn of the century, there was quite a lot of land grabbing going on. Anyway, they built this big mill in Goose Bay and started in June of 1907 and finished and started selling lumber in January of 1908. No, they had 7 logging camps around Goose Bay in those early days, with Val Powers coming from Minnesota here to run the logging camps. In 1930, I worked on the Middle Fork of the Coquille River, where we were driving logs, and in fact, I recognized the Sugarloaf Dam as one of those. That dam is running over. The reason I know it's the Sugarloaf Dam is that it had 2 spillways.
Is going back to Cedar Point, where they was pulling a bunch of logs into the Middle Fork of the Coquille River and floating them down here, and then they'd load them from onto railroad cars here and take them on over to the big mill. And this is where they was loading them out of the Coquille River.
And the loading hooks were very dangerous things. I used those a lot, and they could slip out, and if one of them hit you, knock your head off.
I went to work at Winchester Bay Lumber Company at Winchester Bay in 1927. And during the steam donkey days, and then went up and worked out of Portland until June in 1929, and come down, went to work for Goose Bay Lumber Company at Cuttingham Creek. Well, it was a pretty good-sized camp. The hook tender was Hank Bunch.
See, these are what we call the hay rack boom. They was loaded so that they'd stay on, supposedly.
If the loader, on one landing, he kept losing too many of his logs. He wasn't the head loader very long.
What do they got here? 2-spot? Yeah, that's the 2-spot. Top of the stack.
Railroad construction began out of Myrtle Point in 1913, heading 18 miles south, up the South Fork of the Coquille River toward the present town of Powers. By 1915, they had reached Baker Creek, where they first logged on the South Fork at Camp 4. In 1916, they started logging at the new company town of Powers, with a headquarters camp there. 3 logging railroad lines were extended beyond Powers into the woods. First, up Salmon Creek to the ridge dividing the Coquille River of Coos County from the Sixes River of Curry County. They built Camp 5 on the ridge, ready to tap the 4 billion board feet of timber the company controlled in that area. And second, a line was extended up the South Fork to Land Creek, where Camp 6 was established. And the third, most important line extended up Mill Creek toward Eden Ridge and the 8 billion feet of timber the company controlled there. Old Camp 7 was built near the ridge. In about 1922, old Camp 7 was closed and new Camp 7 was built on the Sixes River Ridge, and Camp 8 was built near Gaylord with several miles of track up Yellow Creek. Now, back on Eden Ridge, in 1930, Camp 2 was built. In 1936, Camp 1 was built at Doe Swamp with accommodations for 400 men. In 1942, the Coal Creek Camp was built, and when it closed in 1961, it was one of the very last of the thousands of logging camps which had once dotted the woods of the Pacific Northwest. It was the close of an era.
Now here we come up from Myrtle Point. This is Bridge 1 here. That was a mile long. This will be Bridge 2. Yeah.
The day of the Bandon fire, I was up working for the Goose Bay Lumber Company on the railroad, and we patrolled the track all the way from Powers to Myrtle Point with water cars behind us, and we put fires out all day long. The whole country was on fire. The bridges was on fire and everything else. I mean, I don't know how many fires we put out that day.
3 sets of section crews. One of them worked from Powers to Myrtle Point.
We did have a lot of different railroads in Coos County. I heard one time that we had a figure called somewhere around 70 different short line railroads in the county.
Between Powers and Goose Bay, they lost quite a few logs off the train.
It's coming up towards the Powers yard.
9 spot.
Yeah, that's
the old 9 spot.
shape.
Oh, that's see. 9 spots worked up Island Creek.
See, one of the engines went off the bridge up there. That was, I believe, in 1923 or 24. Lyle McCullough's father-in-law was on it. He was one of the ones that were killed. We got to school, a couple of the kids was in my class, and they called and sent them home. That her father had been killed.
Just out of 7, you went up that Powers Creek, and on top on there, the Camp 5.
They were still operating when I was in high school, still hauling logs out there. And I think the Camp 5 had been closed down sometime then.
They said they had 14 different, 50 steam donkeys and 14 locomotives. It's regrettable that there were so many men killed or maimed. And I can remember it seemed like every spring, young fellows would go out from high school and get hit in the head with a choker bell and get killed.
This side of the Powers Ranch, and we got in a fire up there. Boy, that was a honey. It burned up the trestle behind us. We couldn't save it because it got too hot.
They'll let the loads down after they get them loaded. Yeah, he's going down now. Pretty steep, too, to handle cars that way.
At Camp 5, they had one there. That was 45% grade and a little bit of one place.
Here's how they're loaded, brought those loaded cars up the hill, up that incline. See, that strap goes around over the logs and then comes up underneath the bunk. Is that Big Mary?
It could be.
It looks like Big Mary the cook.
Most generally, the camp food was good. And you put up your own lunch, you know. And you could put in all pie or all sandwiches.
And he'd have all the sliced roast beef, roast pork, baked chicken, dressing, at least 5 or 6 different kinds of pies, even meringue on them, and butter horns, maple bars, donuts, both raised and the other. Oh, sumptuous, you know, just sumptuous.
That is J.W. Forrester there.
Yeah, that's right.
With his back to us. He's taken a bunch of sightseers up the hill.
A good man.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
That's one thing that I like Mr. Forrester for. He had it all figured out. You know, the way they log, he figured they had 50 years logging ahead of them all the time. After they sold it to Georgia Pacific, they just slicked her off. They were done.
Their system there was to build the roads along the tops of the ridges, and then the donkeys would be down in the canyons or over on another ridge. And
yeah, I used to work on one of those, what they call the pit man. If do any oiling or greasing, stuff like that.
They had a rail right down the middle of the bunkhouses. Yeah, there it is.
That was a pretty busy camp. That's a nice place. I got acquainted with Camp 2 and started to learn how to drink coffee.
There's 5 of these trestles between Camp 2 and where it leveled out on the flat up.
Coal Creek. And they were high, too. On the lower side, it was about 85 feet on some of them.
This is 11 spot, the engineer. It's a fellow that we called Addison. He run engine here for years. This was at Doe Swamp on the Eden Ridge. It was built in about 1935. It would accommodate around 400 men. There's 100 of these bunkhouses there, and they form into the bunkhouse.
There's where they had to work for they cut the tree down.
you'd stand on that springboard and you'd chop the face of the tree out after you saw it in there a little bit.
In the old days, you know, they just never stopped until they stopped, and some of them even fell with a sandwich in one hand, but, you know, when they was backing up. They worked by the thousands while they're working so fast.
Most all those old-timers are gone now. Done a pretty good job. Didn't look like it broke. The scaler walking out now, marking her off with a fell in the bucket.
Highly logging, of course, meant that you hung the block about 150 feet in the air in a huge tree after you cut the top out. And I've climbed those big, tall trees. Climbed trees that were so big you couldn't, a 27-foot rope wouldn't reach around. You'd have to splice it out with another smaller rope till you get up around 30 or 40 feet.
What they call the tail track beyond the landing, they can shove so many cars up there, and they shove them past and then spot the head car right at the landing, and then as they load, they got a line on them and they pull them all down.
They take 30 empties up. The empties usually make 3 trips a day with taking empties up there. Sometimes they had 2 trains running.
Kurt Winger, he got both legs cut off up there. Oh, there was people hurt all the time.
Oh, I had 2 uncles that died on the railroad here, and my father got killed.
Yeah, I've just got one eye. I lost this eye in a dynamite cap explosion. Run donkey or load logs or whatever, wherever we short-handed, and they camp foreman gave me top money. That is the same as a hook tender or a climber. I'd run camp when he took his vacation, but they gave me top money, which wasn't very much then. I never made $5 an hour in my life.
And when they get loaded, why, being the engine will come up there and get them out and take them down and leave them and back through a siding and shove some more empties into them, see?
A lot of times I worked up there spotting landings a couple hours before after they quit logging. Then one time I had a runaway. I was loaded down with a heavy train out of Bryant's Landing, a Jippo. It was after dark, like I said, pouring down rain. And she began to crowd me because the brakes weren't holding. I reversed the engine, sand on it. This brakeman told the fireman, he said, "You better jump." The fireman said, "To hell with her." He said, "I'm going right over to the foot of the hill."
When we moved to Myrtle Point, and every afternoon at 4 o'clock, you could see these logging trains going through Myrtle Point, 60, 70, or 80 car loads, long logs, 60 and 80-foot logs going on the way to Goose Bay, every afternoon.
The fellow that would run the dump, he had lights. He pushed lights, just shoved back there and get the cable across underneath and knock the chains loose on the bunks. Up she went, right on back, and you know. But I'd say that they'd dump a trainload of logs in probably an hour, hour and a half.
It was classified as the largest single unit mill in the world at the time it was built. Single unit is one log split. Boy, I'd hate to pull on that. Look at how far it is when they came to the load. Man, I bet that was a backbreaker. He had a barn up there, I think, underneath the bridge there.
It was the biggest, largest lumber mill of all times, most modern, first time using electric motors to run the conveyor chains and so on and so forth.
They was one of the first outfits. They could deliver lumber right from the woods direct to a lumber yard without touching one stick of lumber in that load.
See there, that guy there, he's riding on the hook.
Yeah.
All of the Goose Bay Lumber Company ships were all loaded, you might say, with the gantry cranes.
Yeah. 2 dock men, 8 hole men, 4 on the side, that's 8. The 2 dock men is 10. A winch driver, and a hatch tender, and a hatch boss. That's the 13 men.
The reason they're loading this ship this way is because this ship is a special order of lumber that's going to the Panama.
Look at the small load they take with that big old crane.
The development of the harbor at Goose Bay is an interesting thing. For years and years and years, they had no jetties, and the sand would keep filling the bar up.
The captain on this ship here, his name was Olson, and that dog is Sparky.
I believe he was even the first skipper on the Nan Smith. But Dad worked the planing mill down there. I don't know, I had about 12 planers that are all in a row. Boy, I guess when those things was howling, it was really noisy. Sea going clear up river up to Bay Point, Port Chicago now. You know, that was quite a little run up there. While here, Oakland was a lot quicker to get into. But I was sick all the time when I was down there, so we came back.
We are changing our concept of the timberlands. We find now that there are other people interested in the timber rather than just making lumber out of it, such as the environmental things of animals and birds and you name it, which is important. And it has a tremendous economic impact on the communities when lumber mills cut out, and this has been happening in the Northwest ever since we started logging.
I still say this is the best place in the world to live. I just don't know of any place I would rather live than right here. If I had a real good memory and an ability to do it, the things that happened, you know, in the woods and so on, I could write a book if I had to remember all the incidents.
That big fire they had in 36, I was on one of those little patrol speeders up there, and Forrester come up. He says, take me up the hill, we'll look, see what it looks like.
Sawmilling is an extinct industry around here now.
In my sophomore year, I accepted a contract with Oakland baseball team in the Pacific Coast League. And we went to Visalia in the spring of that year for spring training. That's where they train.
And of course, I worked in the woods off and on, and I worked in a mill or two, and did a lot of organizing in the woods.
Some men have a charmed life. I was one of those, that I had things falling all around me, dangerous things happening, and just never did get hurt. I had my toe cut off once, and that was all.
Yeah, well, there's times here that we could walk up the street, and if we didn't like this fight, we could go up there and watch the next one.
Oh, yeah, I've gotten fisticuffs right out in the middle of the intersection one day. But, there was a fighting going on all the time up there.
15 or 20 loads is a very good train to bring down the mountain because on account of their braking power and curve.
So, as I say, when they log it at 40 and 50 years, I think they're jumping the gun by 50 years.
Yeah.
But maybe for financial reasons, they make them out ahead. I don't know.
Yeah, that was your recreation. I'd go up there amongst the girls and lie about the logging, and then when you go back to camp, talk about the girls.
That's right.
Those fellows are always in pretty good shape. I know Houston, in the morning they'd ride up on the jitney and they'd get off and you could see them going out through the woods where they're going, the sun flashing off those saws.
We always knew that the films were pretty important, and we weren't going to let them out of our sight.